For 3 years, my mother-in-law looked me in the eye across her kitchen table and reminded me that I was nobody, that the roof over my head was hers, that the walls around my family were hers, and that I existed in her house only because she allowed it. My wife, Claire, never once stood up for me. She'd look away, change the subject, or squeeze my hand under the table like that was supposed to be enough. But what neither of them knew was that the foundation they were both standing on, the one they thought made them untouchable, had a crack in it that went all the way down to the truth. And the day that truth surfaced in a single phone call, the man they'd laughed at became the only person in the room still standing. The first time my mother-in-law told me I was nobody, we were standing in the driveway of the house I'd been living in for 6 months. I was carrying groceries inside, 4 bags in each hand, because I always tried to make it in one trip. And she was standing by the front steps, arms crossed, watching me the way a landlord watches a tenant who's late on rent. My name is Marcus Rowe. I'm 34 years old. I work as a logistics coordinator for a shipping company based out of Atlanta. A job that requires me to be awake at 5 in the morning, on my feet for 10 hours, and mentally tracking the movement of freight across 6 states simultaneously. It's not the kind of work that impresses people at dinner parties, but it pays $58,000 a year. It's honest. And I've never missed a shift in 7 years. My wife, Claire, and I got married 4 years ago. We met at a friend's barbecue, dated for a year and a half, and married in a small ceremony at her mother's church. Claire was warm, funny, a little shy around strangers, but sharp and confident when you got to know her. She worked as an administrative assistant at a law firm. Together, our combined income was enough to live modestly but comfortably. The problem was the house. When we got married, Claire's mother, Vivian Holt, offered to let us move into a property she owned on the east side of town. It was a 3-bedroom ranch house in a quiet neighborhood, well-maintained, with a big backyard and a 2-car garage. The deal was simple. We'd live there rent-free while we saved for a down payment on our own place. Vivian would keep the house in her name, and we'd cover utilities and maintenance. It sounded generous. It sounded like a mother helping her daughter get started. And for the first few months, it was exactly that. Vivian came over for Sunday dinners, brought housewarming gifts, complimented the way I'd organized the garage. She called me son and patted my arm and told Claire she'd married a good man. Then the dynamic shifted. Slowly, the way temperature drops, you don't notice it until you're shivering. It started with small comments. I'd rearranged the living room furniture to make space for a bookshelf I'd built, and Vivian walked in the following Sunday and said, "I don't remember approving that change." She smiled when she said it, so I smiled back and treated it like a joke. But the furniture comment was followed by a paint comment. I'd touched up the hallway trim. And then a landscaping comment. I'd planted tomatoes in the backyard. And each time the word approve appeared, and each time the smile got thinner. By the end of our first year in the house, Vivian had stopped calling me son. She called me Marcus in a tone that made my own name sound like something she was tolerating. And then came the driveway. I was carrying the groceries. She was standing on the steps, and she said without any smile at all, "Marcus, I need you to remember something. This house is in my name. Everything in it, the walls, the roof, the yard you keep planting things in, belongs to me. You live here because I allow it. And that means when I say something about how this property is managed, it's not a suggestion." I stood there, holding 8 bags of groceries, and felt something cold move through my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something more like the feeling you get when you realize the ground you've been walking on isn't solid, that it never was. "I understand, Vivian," I said. "Because what else do you say?" She owned the house. That was a fact. And facts, no matter how they're wielded, are hard to argue with when you're standing in someone else's driveway. That evening, I told Claire what her mother had said. She was folding laundry on the bed, and her hands paused for a moment. Just a moment, before resuming their work. "She didn't mean it like that," Claire said. "She's just protective of the property. You know how she is. She told me I live here because she allows it. She's old-fashioned, Marcus. It's her way of saying she cares about the house. It's her way of saying I'm a guest in my own home." Claire looked at me, not with concern, Not with solidarity, with the expression of a woman who was about to choose the path of least resistance, the way she always did when her mother was involved. Just let it go, she said. It's not worth a fight. She went back to folding laundry, and I stood in the doorway of the bedroom, in the house that wasn't mine, in the marriage where my voice apparently wasn't loud enough. And I let it go, the way I'd let everything go, the way I'd been trained, by silence and repetition, to let everything go. The second year was worse. Not because Vivian's comments became more frequent, though they did, but because they became structural. She wasn't just reminding me of my place anymore. She was building a system around it. She started showing up unannounced. Not occasionally, regularly. Tuesday evenings, Saturday mornings. Sometimes I'd come home from work and find her sitting in the kitchen with Claire, the two of them deep in conversation that would stop the moment I walked in. Not guiltily, dismissively. The way people stop talking when someone irrelevant enters the room. She made decisions about the house without consulting me. A new water heater. Vivian chose it. Vivian arranged the installation. Vivian told me afterward. New blinds for the front windows. Same process. A fence along the property line. I came home to find posts in the ground and a contractor I'd never met in the backyard. I didn't know we were getting a fence, I said to Claire. Mom thought it would improve the property value. And nobody thought to mention it to the person who lives here? Claire gave me the look. The one that said, "Don't start this." The one that said, "It's easier if you just go along." The one that, over 2 years, had become less a request and more a command. I want to be fair to Claire. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't cold. She was caught. Or at least that's what I told myself. Caught between a husband she loved and a mother she couldn't stand up to. Vivian had raised Claire alone after Claire's father left when she was 4. The two of them had survived on Vivian's income as a real estate office manager in a series of small apartments until Vivian saved enough to buy the house we now lived in. That house represented everything Vivian had sacrificed and everything she'd achieved. And Claire had grown up understanding that her mother's authority was absolute and her mother's sacrifices were not to be questioned. I understood that. I respected it even. But understanding a dynamic doesn't mean you have to accept being crushed by it. The worst incident happened on a Sunday in March, one of Vivian's dinner visits. I'd spent the morning cooking. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, homemade gravy. I'm a good cook. It's one of the few domestic skills I'm proud of. And I'd put real effort into the meal because I thought, foolishly, that a good dinner might soften whatever edge Vivian was carrying that week. We sat down. Vivian took one bite of the chicken, set down her fork, and said, "This is dry." It wasn't dry. I'd brined it overnight and roasted it at the correct temperature and let it rest for 15 minutes before carving. But that wasn't the point. The point was the performance. Vivian pushing her plate forward, Claire immediately offering to make something else, and me sitting at the table I'd set, looking at the meal I'd prepared, understanding that this had nothing to do with chicken. "Vivian," I said, "I followed the recipe exactly. The chicken is fine." She looked at me. That look, the one that said I had spoken out of turn, that the help had forgotten his station. Marcus, when I say something about the food in this house, my house, I expect it to be received, not debated. This isn't about the food. You're right, it's about respect. And respect means understanding that when the person who owns the home you're sitting in tells you something, you listen. I looked at Claire. She was staring at her plate. Her hands were in her lap. She said nothing. "Claire," I said. "Nothing." "Claire." She looked up. Her eyes were pained. I could see that. She wasn't enjoying this, but she wasn't stopping it either. "Mom, the chicken is great," she said softly. "A compromise?" "A nothing," Vivian smiled. Not at Claire. At me. A smile that said, "See? This is how it works. This is how it will always work." I excused myself from the table. I went to the garage, sat on the concrete step, and stared at the wall for 20 minutes. When I came back inside, Vivian was gone, Claire was washing dishes, and neither of them mentioned the dinner again. That night, lying in bed, Claire reached for my hand. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Then do something about it." Silence. Her hand stayed on mine, but the grip loosened. "She's my mother, Marcus. And I'm your husband. I know. But the house is in her name." "Yes, I've been reminded." She rolled over. I stared at the ceiling. And somewhere in the dark, in the house that wasn't mine, in the marriage where I was always outranked, I started making a plan. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not Claire, not my friends, not my brother Terrence, who'd been telling me for a year to get out of that woman's house before she buries you under it. I didn't tell anyone because the plan required patience, and patience requires silence. And silence was the one thing I'd been practicing for 2 years. Here's what nobody in the Holt family knew about me. I was good with money. Not flashy good, not crypto investments or day trading or anything that makes noise. Quietly good, consistently good. The kind of good that comes from growing up in a household where every dollar was accounted for and nothing was wasted. My mother, Lorraine Rowe, had raised 3 boys on a teacher's salary in a small house in Macon, Georgia. She taught us that financial discipline wasn't about getting rich. It was about never being vulnerable. "A man with savings," she used to say, "is a man with choices. And a man with choices is a man nobody can control." I'd taken that lesson to heart. Since my early 20s, I'd been saving aggressively, 15 to 20% of every paycheck, deposited into accounts that Claire knew about in general terms but never examined closely. She knew I had savings. She didn't know how much, because she'd never asked, and I'd never volunteered the information. Not out of secrecy, out of habit. Money in my mother's house was private. You didn't display it. You didn't discuss it. You just had it, quietly, like an emergency exit you hoped you'd never need. Living rent-free in Vivian's house for 2.5 years had accelerated things considerably. Without a mortgage or rent payment, I'd been able to save at a pace that would have been impossible otherwise. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who called me nobody in her house had inadvertently given me the financial runway to become somebody outside of it. I started looking at properties, quietly, on my lunch breaks, using my phone in the cab of my truck at the distribution center. I wasn't looking for a mansion. I was looking for something solid. A house in a decent neighborhood, with a yard and a garage and enough space for a family, in a price range that I could handle on my own if necessary. I found it in April. A 3-bedroom bungalow on the south side of town, in a neighborhood that was modest but well-kept. The kind of street where people mowed their lawns and waved at each other and left Christmas lights up 1 week too long. The house needed some work. New paint, updated fixtures, a few repairs to the deck. But the bones were strong, the price was right, and it was mine. I made an offer. Cash. The full asking price. No contingencies, no financing, no bank involved. Just a man with a cashier's check and a clear title search. The seller accepted within 48 hours. I closed on the house on a Wednesday afternoon, sitting in a title company office with a pen in my hand and a feeling in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. Ownership. Not borrowed, not conditional, not subject to anyone's approval or anyone's mood. Mine. My name on the deed. My signature on the documents. My house. I drove to the new property after closing. I stood in the empty living room on the hardwood floors that needed refinishing, under the ceiling that needed a fresh coat of paint, and I called my mother. "I bought a house, Mom." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "In your name?" "In my name." "Good. Now you've got choices." I spent the next 3 weeks working on the house in secret. Evenings after work, weekends when I told Claire I was picking up extra shifts. I painted. I repaired. I installed new light fixtures and replaced the kitchen faucet and sanded the deck and stained it a warm cedar color that reminded me of my mother's porch. I furnished it slowly. A bed, a couch, a kitchen table, a dresser. Nothing extravagant, just the essentials. Enough to make it livable. Nobody knew. Not Claire, not Vivian, not anyone. I had a house, fully owned, fully furnished, waiting for me like a lifeboat bolted to the side of a sinking ship. And I waited. Not for the right moment, for the wrong one. Because I knew Vivian would provide it. She always did. It came on a Saturday in May, Vivian's birthday. Claire had organized a dinner at the house, Vivian's house, as I was never allowed to forget, with a few of Vivian's friends and Claire's cousin, Denise. I'd been assigned cooking duty, naturally. I spent the afternoon preparing a full spread: baked salmon, rice pilaf, roasted asparagus, a Caesar salad, and a chocolate cake I'd made from scratch because Vivian had once mentioned, in a rare moment of warmth, that chocolate cake was her favorite. The dinner started fine. Vivian was in good spirits, accepting compliments, holding court at the head of the table. Her friends cooed over the food, the flowers Claire had arranged, the house itself. "Vivian, your home is just beautiful," one of them said. "You've done so well for yourself." Vivian smiled. "I worked hard for this place. Every brick, every board. I earned it." She looked at me when she said it. Briefly but unmistakably. A glance that said, "And don't you forget it." I smiled back. Serenely. Because for the first time in 3 years, her words didn't land. They passed through me like wind through an open window. Felt, acknowledged, and gone. After dinner, while I was cleaning up in the kitchen, Vivian cornered me by the sink. Her friends had moved to the living room. Claire was serving coffee. It was just the two of us, and Vivian had the look she always got when she wanted to say something she'd been saving. "Marcus, I need to discuss something with you." "Of course, Vivian." "Claire mentioned that you've been picking up extra shifts lately. Working weekends." "That's right. I hope that means you're finally saving for something useful. Because I've been thinking about this property and I want to do some renovations, new kitchen counters, maybe a bathroom remodel. Since you're living here rent-free, I think it's only fair that you contribute to the improvements." She said it the way she said everything. As a statement, not a question. A decree from the throne. "How much are we talking about?" I asked. 15, maybe 20,000. I've already gotten estimates. I'll send them to Claire and she can coordinate with you." $20,000. She wanted me to pay $20,000 to renovate a house I had no ownership stake in, no equity in, and no legal right to. A house she could sell tomorrow and keep every penny. "I'll think about it," I said. "I'd appreciate a quick answer. The contractor has availability next month." She walked away. I stood at the sink, hands in warm water, and felt a calm so deep it frightened me. Not anger, not resignation, just the quiet certainty of a man who knows exactly what he's about to do. I dried my hands, took out my phone, and called my brother Terrence. "It's time," I said. "You sure?" "I'm sure." The next evening, a Sunday, I sat Claire down at the kitchen table after dinner. No television, no distractions, no escape routes. "I need to tell you something," I said. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Something's right for the first time in a long time." I took a breath. "I bought a house." Claire stared at me. "You what?" "I bought a house. 3-bedroom bungalow on Maple Street, South Side. Paid cash. It's in my name. I closed on it 5 weeks ago." Her mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. "How? Where did you get—" "I've been saving since I was 22. Living rent-free here for 3 years made it possible to reach the number I needed. I did it on my own, with my own money, without asking anyone for permission." Claire's face was cycling through emotions like a slot machine. Confusion, disbelief, something that might have been admiration, and then, inevitably, fear. "What does this mean?" she asked. "It means I'm moving out. Tomorrow, I'm going to my house. My house, Claire, with my name on the deed. And I'm going to live there. The question is whether you're coming with me." "Marcus. My mother." "Your mother owns this house. She's made that clear every single day for 3 years. She's welcome to it. But I am done living in a place where I'm reminded weekly that I'm nobody. I am done eating dinners where my cooking is insulted as a power move. I am done watching my wife choose silence over support because the person with the deed has more authority than the person with the ring. Claire was crying. Quietly, the way she always cried. Controlled, contained, like even her grief needed permission. I love you, I said. I've loved you since the night we met, but I will not spend another day in a house where my dignity is the rent I pay. So I'm giving you a choice. The same choice your mother never gave me. Come with me or stay here, but decide by morning. I got up from the table, went to the garage, and started loading boxes into my truck. I was loading the last box into my truck the next morning when Vivian's car pulled into the driveway. She got out fast, faster than I'd ever seen her move, and marched toward me with her phone in her hand and a look on her face that was equal parts fury and disbelief. "What is this?" she demanded, holding the phone up like a weapon. "Claire called me at 6 o'clock this morning crying, saying you're leaving. What do you think you're doing?" "I'm moving to my house, Vivian." "Your house?" She laughed. That short, dismissive laugh she'd been directing at me for 3 years. "What house? You don't have a house. You have a job and a truck and whatever's in your savings account, which I'm guessing isn't much. I own a 3-bedroom home on Maple Street. Paid in full. My name on the deed." The laugh stopped. Vivian's face went through a rapid transformation. Amusement to confusion to something she couldn't hide fast enough. Panic. That's not possible. "I closed 5 weeks ago. The title is clean. I can show you the paperwork if you'd like." She stared at me. For the first time in 3 years, Vivian Holt did not have a response. Her mouth worked slightly, as if testing words and rejecting each one, and I realized I was witnessing something I'd never seen before. Vivian without leverage. "Claire isn't going with you," she said finally. "She would never leave this house." "That's her choice, not yours. This is her home. Her family home. I built this for her." "You built this for control, Vivian." And it worked. For 3 years, it worked beautifully. But the thing about control is that it only lasts as long as the other person has nowhere else to go. The front door opened. Claire stood on the porch. She was dressed. She had a bag over her shoulder. A small bag. Not everything. Not a final departure, but enough for a few days. Enough to signal a direction. "Mom," she said. "I'm going with Marcus." Vivian spun around. "Claire, don't be ridiculous. You're emotional. He's manipulating you." "He's the only person who hasn't been manipulating me." That sentence hit the morning air and stayed there, vibrating, like a bell that had been struck after years of silence. Vivian flinched. Actually flinched. A physical recoil that moved through her shoulders and into her hands. "After everything I've done for you," Vivian whispered. "I know what you've done, Mom. And I'm grateful. But what you've done for me and what you've done to my husband are 2 different things. And I've spent 3 years pretending they weren't." Claire walked down the porch steps, crossed the driveway, and got into my truck. She didn't look back. She didn't slam the door. She just sat in the passenger seat and buckled her seatbelt and waited for me. Vivian turned to me one last time. Her eyes were wet, but her jaw was set, and I could see her assembling one final volley. One last reminder of who owned what, of who mattered and who didn't, of the hierarchy she'd built and maintained with such meticulous precision. But before she could speak, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Her expression changed, shifted from anger to confusion, and she answered. "Hello, yes, this is Vivian Holt." I watched her face as she listened. I watched the color drain out of it, slowly and then all at once, like water leaving a bathtub. "What do you mean?" she said. "That's not... I've been paying on time. Every month." More listening. Her hand moved to her chest. "A lien? What lien?" That was resolved years ago. My attorney said..." She turned away from me as if privacy could undo whatever she was hearing. But I caught fragments. Back taxes, property assessment, title defect. Legal proceedings. The call lasted 4 minutes. When it ended, Vivian stood in the driveway holding her phone at her side, staring at the house. Her house, the house she'd held over my head like a sword for 3 years. With an expression I recognized, because I'd worn it myself countless times in that same driveway. The expression of a person who has just discovered that the ground beneath them isn't solid. "What happened?" I asked. Not with satisfaction, not with cruelty, with genuine curiosity. She didn't answer me. She walked past me, got into her car, and drove away without a word. I'd learned the details later, through Claire and eventually through public records. Vivian's house, the house, the weapon, the throne, had a tax lien dating back nearly a decade, connected to a property assessment dispute that her former attorney had bungled. The lien had been quietly accumulating penalties and interest, and the county had finally initiated enforcement proceedings. The amount owed was significant, enough to threaten the property itself. The house that Vivian had told me she owned free and clear, the house she'd used to remind me of my worthlessness every week for 3 years, was in jeopardy. Not because of me, not because of anything I'd done, but because of a mistake she'd made long before I ever entered her life, buried under years of silence and assumption. The weeks that followed were the strangest of my marriage. Claire and I were living in my house, the bungalow on Maple Street with the cedar deck and the freshly painted rooms and the quiet street where neighbors waved. She'd brought more of her things over gradually, box by box, as if she was testing the permanence of the decision with each trip. She was different here. I noticed it immediately. In Vivian's house, Claire had been muted. Her voice lower, her opinions softer, her instincts always filtered through the question of what her mother would think. In our house, mine, then ours, she laughed louder. She chose where to put the furniture. She painted the spare bedroom a pale yellow because she liked it, not because anyone had approved it. "I didn't realize how small I'd been making myself," she said one evening, standing in the kitchen doorway, looking at the room like she was seeing it for the first time. "I know the feeling," I said. Vivian, meanwhile, was drowning. The tax lien was worse than the initial phone call had suggested. Her former attorney had not only failed to resolve the dispute, he'd missed filing deadlines that triggered automatic penalties. The total amount owed, with interest and fees, had ballooned to a number that Vivian couldn't cover from her savings alone. She was facing the possibility of a forced sale, the county seizing her property to satisfy the debt. The irony was so precise it almost hurt. The woman who had spent 3 years telling me I was nobody in her house was now at risk of losing the very house she'd used as her identity. Claire was torn. Whatever Vivian had done to me, and Claire was finally, fully acknowledging what that was. Vivian was still her mother. Still the woman who'd raised her alone, who'd worked and sacrificed and built something from nothing. Claire didn't want to watch her mother lose everything, even if everything had been wielded as a weapon. "I don't know what to do," Claire said. "I do," I said. I called Vivian. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice flat and tired. A voice I'd never heard from her, stripped of authority and performance. "Marcus, what do you want?" "I want to help." Silence. Long enough that I checked to see if the call had dropped. "You want to help me?" she repeated. "After everything." "After everything. Yes." "Why?" I thought about the question. I could have given the noble answer. Because it's the right thing to do, because family is family, because kindness matters more than pride. And those things were true, but they weren't the whole truth. Because my mother taught me that a man with choices is a man nobody can control. I have choices, Vivian. I have a house in my name, money in my account, and a wife who finally chose to stand beside me. I'm not helping you because I need to. I'm helping you because I can. And I want you to understand the difference. Another silence. Then, so quietly I almost missed it. "I understand. I didn't pay off the lien. That would have been foolish, and my mother didn't raise a fool. What I did was connect Vivian with a tax attorney, a real one, competent and ethical, who I'd found through my company's legal referral network. I covered the attorney's retainer. I sat with Vivian at the kitchen table in my house, and helped her organize 2 decades of financial documents so the attorney could build a case for penalty abatement. It took months. The attorney negotiated a reduced settlement with the county, set up a payment plan, and filed the paperwork to clear the lien over time. Vivian's house was saved. Not comfortably, not without cost, but saved. During those months, something happened that I hadn't planned for and didn't expect. Vivian changed. Not dramatically. She didn't become a different person overnight. She was still sharp, still proud, still difficult in the way that strong women who've survived hard lives are sometimes difficult. But the edges softened. The comments stopped. The unannounced visits ended. And one afternoon, while we were sorting receipts at my kitchen table, she looked up at me and said something I'd waited 3 years to hear. "I was wrong about you, Marcus." She didn't elaborate. She didn't apologize in a grand, sweeping way. She just said it plainly, and then went back to sorting receipts. And I accepted it plainly, because I'd learned that some people show remorse the only way they know how. Quietly, in small gestures, over time. A year has passed since I loaded those boxes into my truck and drove away from Vivian's driveway. The bungalow on Maple Street is no longer the sparse, freshly painted starter home I moved into with a bag of clothes and a kitchen table. It's a home, filled, lived in, marked by the small accumulations of daily life. Claire's books on the shelf, lily-patterned curtains she sewed herself for the bedroom, a garden out back where I grow tomatoes without anyone telling me I need approval. Claire and I are different here, not perfect. No marriage is perfect, and ours carries the scar tissue of 3 years spent in someone else's house under someone else's rules. We still argue. We still have nights where the old patterns surface, where Claire goes quiet instead of speaking up, where I go rigid instead of bending. But we catch it now. We name it. We sit at our kitchen table, in our house, and we talk like two people who've earned the right to be heard. Claire went back to therapy, something she'd resisted for years, partly because Vivian had always dismissed it as self-indulgent. She's been working through what she calls the permission problem, the lifelong habit of waiting for someone else to approve her choices before she makes them. It's slow work. But I see the changes in small ways. The firmness in her voice when she disagrees with me. The way she makes decisions about our home without looking over her shoulder. The morning last month when Vivian suggested a different color for our front door, and Claire said simply, "I like the color we chose." Vivian still comes over. Not unannounced, she calls first now, and waits to be invited. She sits at my table and drinks the coffee I make, and sometimes, on good days, she compliments the food I cook. She has never again told me I'm nobody. She has never again reminded me whose name is on a deed. Her house is still hers. The lien is being paid down, month by month, and the attorney I connected her with has kept the county at bay. She'll keep the property. She'll probably outlive us all out of sheer determination. But the power it held, the weight of ownership she'd carried like a crown and used like a hammer, is gone. Not because she lost the house, but because the man she'd tried to diminish with it had built one of his own. And in doing so, had taken the only thing she'd ever held over him and made it irrelevant. Last Thanksgiving, we hosted dinner at Maple Street. Claire cooked the turkey. I made the sides. Vivian brought a pie, store-bought, which for Vivian was an act of humility so profound it bordered on revolutionary. We sat around the table, Claire, Vivian, my brother Terrence and his wife, a few friends from the neighborhood, and we ate together in a house that belonged to me, at a table I'd chosen, in a life I'd built with my own hands and my own patience and my own stubborn refusal to accept that I was nobody. After dinner, while the others were in the living room, Vivian found me on the back deck. I was standing at the railing looking at the yard, my yard, in the fading November light. She stood beside me for a moment without speaking. Then she said, "This is a good house, Marcus." "Thank you, Vivian. You built something here." "I did." She nodded. She didn't say anything else. She went back inside, and I heard her laugh at something Terrence said, and the sound drifted through the open door and settled into the evening like it belonged there. I stood on my deck in the cold and thought about what my mother had told me all those years ago. A man with choices is a man nobody can control. She was right, but she'd left out the second half of the lesson, the part I'd had to learn for myself. A man with choices isn't just free, he's generous. Because when you're not fighting for your own survival, when you're not defending your right to exist in someone else's space, you have the room, the actual, physical, emotional room, to help the people who once tried to make you small. Not out of weakness, not out of obligation, out of the quiet, unshakable knowledge that you are somebody, that you always were. The house is in my name, and I am nobody's nobody.